what the hell does success even mean?
Today, even that LinkedIn post is so cringy if you are and hence trying to show that you're successful in a regular corporate setting. The earlier you kind of acknowledge it for yourself, maybe this journey becomes a little easier.
Or at least more mindful. What does success mean now?
Work on yourself to figure out what path could you possibly take now.
The day you were leaving, that you would still feel fulfilled all these years later.
I did have a choice and I exercised that choice for many reasons. When we think of doing something new together, we start off very gung-ho,
Eager,
right?
yeah,
Like there's a lot of positivity
Yeah.
till you get down to the brass tack.
Preferably 3-4 days into the brass tacks, it really hits.
Hi, this is Small Talk, Work, Play, Build. I've been thinking a bit about that grand notion of success. And I actually realized that if I measure myself and how successful I am today by the metrics that a stereotypical engineer MBA from premier schools would use, I've probably failed quite grandly, right? I left a corporate career and I've chosen a path where I'm still learning, still growing, still figuring out the art and science of it. And if I were to maybe, compare myself, how can you know if you're successful if you don't compare? If I were to compare myself with others in the field, I have miles to go, many more hours to clock, very senior clients to bag. But then how is it that I'm able to wake up and feel very successful every morning when I walk down to the bus stand to drop my daughter, or when I open the door for her when she comes back home? So I think really would like to rethink what success is in today's world. What say?
As you were talking, I just also realized um, the macroeconomic aspect of this, right? There was a time when success meant buying a house, being settled by a certain age, by traditional notions. One of the reasons it's not possible today is because all of these things are a lot more expensive to execute. Um, the buying of a house probably 30 years ago on a single income with a loan and an EMI was a very doable thing, which is not the case today anymore. Also, there is that volatility, especially maybe around COVID, we sensed it more, but there was always that sense that I can be chucked out anytime. So, really, all my income is disposable income in some ways. And that's where we are all doing a little bit of the first principles rewind into what does success now mean, because there is no concept of loyalty either from the company and therefore also to the company. There's also no construct of if I do these things by this age, then here's a very small group of social existence that I can impress through this. There are no 50 people anymore who will, probably look at it and say, hey, yes, you've arrived. That middle circle of influence has disappeared. Now it's just close family, friends who will really see what you've, gone through. And then there's a whole wide
Everybody
world
else.
out there to whom. And it's interesting, Subha, because when we talk about all the different things that we do in life, today sometimes it also feels like, say, if you want to sing on Instagram, you have to be really good at it. Like, if you want to put something up on social media, which is that outer circle, you have to be so vastly better than anyone else at it. Otherwise, it's better you don't do it. So, we are all, I think, going through that process of saying, but what the hell does success even mean? Because all these playbooks don't seem to.
Yeah, because even if you are trying to show that you are if you are and hence trying to show that you're successful in a regular corporate setting, today even that LinkedIn post is so cringy because you felt that I need to go to chat GPT and write the best version of this little tidbit that I want to put out there, and nobody wants to read it anymore. So definitely I think we have to look at what is this notion of success, and it's different for different people. And the earlier you kind of acknowledge it for yourself,
Hmm. Hmm.
maybe this journey becomes a little easier.
Or at
It's
least more mindful.
definitely. I think there was a stat I read that about 40% of the workforce um, had some kind of a mindset question and shift post pandemic, some kind of
Hmm.
McKinsey
Hmm.
stat. And I saw it in my coaching work also,
Hmm.
that during and after, the number of folks who were mid career or heading to mid career really questioning their choices in a good way, saying,
Hmm.
hey, what else could I be doing, because I've kind of seen a different life
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think I like it and I think I can push myself, because I've been in you know a space which is so out of my comfort zone, so I can do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So definitely people are thankfully rethinking and saying, oh, there could be different ways to measure my success at work.
Hmm. But how do you avoid that insecurity of it not being a socially acceptable or a socially valued notion of success, right? And I think we really just need to sit with that question. And I've asked you that many times, Subha, in terms of like, did you know the day you were leaving that you would still feel fulfilled all these years
Mm.
later? How was that journey for you? Was it easy to quit? And I think I mean, kudos to you. Your answer has stayed steady throughout. But I think what I took away each time was probably different.
Mm.
And which is why I really kind of want to understand what was that transition even like at a time when maybe not everyone was doing it.
Yeah, not everyone was doing it out of such a from such a position of choice, I think. So there is that
Hmm.
privilege element that we keep coming back to
Yeah.
for so many things, that I did have a choice and I exercised that choice for many reasons. And also, I think there are two parts to it. If I look back now, there's one very optimistic side of any change that's imminent, right?
Hmm.
It's like a bird flying out of that cage, and there's this whole world is possible. So there's that one bit which is always positivity, and I'll kind of find that one perfect thing, one right thing, and my life is going to change, and everything is going to
Yeah.
be so beautiful, and all of that. So that element, even today, when we think of doing something new together, we start off very gung ho, right?
Ego.
Like
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of positivity
Yeah.
till you get down to the brass tacks.
Preferably 3, 4 days into the brass tacks, it really hits. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But otherwise, no, I don't think I knew, because and that time when so many people said you're being brave, I wondered, what's
Yeah.
there to be brave? But I get it now, because it takes a lot of work on yourself
Hmm.
to figure out what path
Hmm.
could you possibly take now. And maybe it was very timely that I also started my coaching journey then. So there was work happening on myself,
Yeah.
because to become a coach you have to kind of be coached in a way, right? You have
Hmm.
to become so much more self aware of yourself, your patterns, and all of that.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I said initially, by most metrics I have a long way to go, which
Hmm.
is fine, which I want, because
That's the
otherwise,
important bit, I
what's
think.
the
Yeah.
joy? Like, if I don't have something more to aspire to, if
Hmm.
I don't want to learn that one more new skill in coaching, or if I don't want to, coach teams in a certain kinds of organizations and
Yeah.
certain caliber of people, then what am I
Hmm.
really doing, right? I want
Yeah.
to be better every day,
Hmm.
but also I think understanding what is my day to day success.
Hmm. Which was the question I had for you. It's been quite a while, right? It's
Hmm.
almost close to 10 years of,
Yeah, yeah, crazy.
being out and about on your own. Um, do you still sit with that question of what does success mean now? Or are the broad brushstrokes still clear enough to make sense even to this day?
No, I think I still grapple with it.
Hmm.
Um, because if you remember, like, I mean, I did do multiple things. So there was a period where there was a very thriving content
Yeah, yeah.
agency.
That's how we met.
That's how
So,
we met. And, in the maybe 5 6 years of that content agency, did more than 80 clients and a lot of good work,
Yeah.
right? And the pandemic and just my wanting to focus on coaching, I said I'm kind of, you know, pulling the curtains on that,
Hmm.
right? But when I was running the content agency, this question of what is success, and we would have that conversation. My husband would ask me, "Is this going to be you and 5 people,
Yeah.
or you and 20, or one day is it a you and 200?
Hmm.
Like, what is success here?" Somehow, I never saw it as me and 200,
Yeah.
which is why probably I was able to disassociate from it also
Hmm. Hmm.
and move on to something else. And now the work that I do, which is only coaching, here success feels very different. It's
Hmm.
not as measurable as, it's not going to be a team size measurement.
Hmm.
Even I could be doing 5 clients, but if they're all CXOs, then that has a certain value to it
Hmm.
than, you know, just saying, oh, I coached 30 different people.
Yeah. But does this cause any quantum of insecurity on any level or any quantum of doubt? Because we are all human and
Human
very
being.
mortal. I just wonder, because, like you said, I mean, some of these journeys are so long. You and I have shared, this kind of a mentor-mentee relationship for about 5, 6 years now. So growth. I mean, you're actually watching a plant become
Hmm.
a tree, right? Like, literally, and
Hmm.
it's still very much a plant, by the way.
Yeah.
So how do you then contextualize for yourself the impact that you're having? Is that does that feature anywhere in your definition of success? And if so, how?
So I think that's the interesting part. Like, if you don't find ways to measure success that um, are authentic, or will actually make you feel happy when you kind of hit that mark,
Hmm.
then it's no use to you. Like, I
Hmm.
could say, for example, that, oh, I am associated with 10 different firms that empanel coaches,
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
example.
Hmm.
But the one story, or however often you tell me that, hey, that thing you said in 2019, you just said that 10 minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
That is success. No, success in a very, no, not
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll you know fly a flag and celebrate, but that is the, oh, I wanted this kind of
Hmm.
impact,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I'm
That makes
so I'm
sense.
on the right track.
Yeah. I mean, just for context, the conversation we were having backstage is that in 2019, I walked up to you and I said, I think after about 5 years of writing day in, day out,
Mm.
I have forgotten how to write. And it was the scariest moment for me professionally at that time, because if a writer can't write,
Mm.
then what exactly will you do in your
Mm.
life? And it was just like a mental shutdown, like all processes involved in writing had just stopped happening in my mind. And I remember that day you said, like, what is the promotion you're giving yourself? Because you can't be a writer for 20 years of your life, 30 years of your life.
Mm.
If that needle is not moving, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, beyond a point, give yourself a promotion.
Mm.
And I think that was the beginning of a lot of other kind of interesting things that happened
Mm.
thereafter.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is strangely like the language we use with ourselves, no?
Hmm. Hmm.
The vocabulary that we use, what we choose to measure,
Yeah.
what we choose. And also, I think this maybe is a trigger to say that you also need an accountability
Hmm.
partner, don't you?
Yeah.
Like, if you're always only in your own head, defining things which are comfortable to measure,
Hmm.
or where you're already succeeding, then where's the growth going to come from?
So, where is the witness going to come from? Somehow it feels important
Hmm.
today more than ever to have someone bear witness to that
Yeah.
journey somehow.
We kind of got used. I don't know. Is it because we've got used to it? Like, you didn't take a holiday unless you posted it on Instagram, right?
It's
So,
not the social, and that's validation, right? Like, I think
hmm.
it's more of, sure, I mean, it's a nice looking picture, you put it up. I think that feels more like, okay, social capital.
Hmm.
But I'm also thinking, have you seen the journey
Someone
that
to wit.
led up to that point?
Hmm.
And I say more so now because this is probably in recent memory, the first generation that is rethinking what a career even means.
Yeah.
So for me to have this conversation with someone in the generation of my parents, it takes a while. In fact, it has taken a lot of kind of back and forthing to even come to the same page to say that starting up is your dream, not mine.
Hmm.
And that this is something I grew into. It was not something that came organically to me. I'm not a second generation entrepreneur by design.
Hmm.
It is something I had to grow. It was a big pot and I was a very small plant, and I'm still kind of figuring out where the roots go.
Hmm.
And so things like that, I think, okay, why don't you have a house? Or why don't you have, you know? So it
Yeah.
feels that much more important to have a relevant witness to this process.
Hmm.
And that's accountability to me, I think. I mean,
Correct.
not so much to say, oh, you're doing so horrible, please do better, but more to say you've come this far
Hmm.
because of these reasons
Yeah.
and these attributes. How much further can you go?
Yeah.
Or even sometimes I think to call bullshit for
No, I think definitely, right? Like, and we've had this conversation about this entire notion of a gig economy. And I mean, I've always held that I'm able to do a lot of things that I do today or say yes to
Hmm.
because of a good grounding in a corporate, and a good corporate, luckily, but a kind of a grounding in structures,
Hmm.
systems,
Hmm.
processes,
Hmm.
that even if I take up something completely new, I'm able to give it that time and attention in a way to, for myself at least, structure it, make a plan around it, give it
Hmm.
context,
Make a
etc.
Trello board. Our favorite thing to do.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but today, so many are just growing up in that gig economy,
Hmm.
right? Saying, okay, I'm qualified, I've finished my education, and now I'm going to be on my own and keep finding places to, like, kind of temporarily plant myself, right?
Hmm.
I'm associated with these people, but there's no one overarching structure.
Hmm.
Then you need somebody who's witness, like you said, to say, hey, it's been 4 years since you did something new.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you can't survive in a corporate structure for so long without having done something more.
Yeah. And that's a question I think you ask when you're doing resume work or like,
Yeah.
job preparation or readiness work. Is to start noticing what changed
Yeah.
in the 4, 5, 10 years
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
doing what you did. But it also kind of makes me think of all the people who are now sort of either starting out in more impact careers or moving into more impact careers. Like you said, early days very exciting because you're solving the problem of the
Hmm.
century in some
Hmm.
ways. And what you do can have very far reaching effects, but somewhere all of us starting we forget that there are 1,000 others doing the same thing.
Hmm.
And unless there is a very internal definition of how this is going to look, because today you have taken a lot of chances.
Yeah.
You've taken a chance in a new industry, you've probably gone in at a lower salary than most of your peers in
Correct.
slightly more established industries would go for. But you made this choice, but will you live to regret it tomorrow? That visibility doesn't
Yeah.
exist on today's
Yeah.
day and age.
And hopefully you won't regret it, but you will see it as, I don't know, an opportunity cost, or, chances missed
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
way, right? Like, I could have also reached here working
By
in a
going
more
somewhere, yeah,
structured way, or in a more thought through, with a
yeah.
plan, etc. So I think two things. One, once you know, okay, or once you're in a space or you're doing a certain kind of work, um, do spend time periodically saying, how am I measuring growth here?
Mm,
Right? Because if you generally, I mean, it's a generalization, but if you're growing and doing newer things and being challenged at the next level and coming out kind of with a positive outcome, then generally you feel good, right?
yeah.
So how am I going to measure this, the growth in this? What would tell me that I'm stagnating?
Mm.
What would tell me that this is now just comfort work?
Which I'm realizing, I mean, the simplest way to kind of even start looking at that is to say, what am I being typecast into, or what am I
Mm,
being
yeah.
shoehorned into doing? Because that is the thing that I'm known for now. which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being so good at what you do that that's the
Yeah,
thing people remember you for. But are they then not bringing other challenges your way? Are they not?
yeah,
I
yeah,
think in a more corporate environment with more people in the mix, that could be
yeah.
potentially one thing to
It was
look at.
reminding me of this Matthew McConaughey's book Green
Green
Lights, and then
lights.
he talks a lot about it, about how he had become such a rom-com guy,
Hmm.
and like you said, that's what he's now typecast, and that's the only work that's coming to him, till he said no to a rom-com, and that was $15 million, which at that time, maybe 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and even today, it's a lot of money. And that was such a difficult no, but he stuck to that no,
Hmm.
saying, enough, like, bring me other stuff.
It's funny because I didn't know he was a rom com guy. I thought he was the Interstellar guy. Like
Oh,
I
no,
had
no,
no.
no. He was like such a rom-com guy. I think he's
It worked. In case he's listening, not that he is.
he's
It
pivoted well.
worked.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to kind of, I think, one, be accountable to yourself, right? I'm doing this. Can I say, okay, I'll do this for the next 3, 4 years? What does growth look like? What does success look like? What am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? What's the pattern emerging in that?
Yeah.
And I think the younger kids in the workforce are lucky that pivoting, changing, jumping ship, all is okay.
Very much so.
Very much.
Very
There's
much so.
very little stigma attached to any of it.
Yeah. Which is great.
No, which is such a liberating thing, right? That you can be a podcaster, YouTuber for 3, 4 years, then you go into screenwriting, then maybe you act yourself, and then you come back to something. It's all
Which is where I
acceptable.
think that whole journalistic process of saying what are the transferable skills that I'm
Yeah.
carrying. And there are many. There are many skills that you carry from one thing to the next to the next. I don't think we would have been so invested in the podcast if we both didn't have some background in content.
Yeah, true.
So I think just
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
fact that we are here now
Yeah.
is that journey started a decade ago, probably more. So
Correct. And I mean, I actually don't have a background in content, right?
I mean,
If, like,
10 years before, even I didn't.
huh.
I mean,
So that's something we ventured into, and said, okay, these are some of the metrics that will tell us we're okay. And there did come a point where we said it's not feeling good.
yeah,
It's not feeling like there is growth here.
yeah. And that's the accountability partnership, I think, that we are also referring to. Great to find it in maybe formal professional context. Maybe this is what systems try to encourage as, a mentor mentee relationship or
Hmm.
assign a buddy to you. I think this is the whole idea behind it,
Yeah, no,
perhaps.
very true. But interestingly, now, like, when I think about it, even the corporate space that I left, well, there were many reasons, family, this, that. One of the reasons was, I think, I got bored,
Hmm.
right? So when you ask yourself, where is growth going to come from? I felt like it was coming from scale. Like, okay, you can manage a larger team,
Hmm.
but the core work was the same.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that too, I was in a very actually dynamic and exciting field of finance, and a lot of fintech was happening. So I could have pivoted that way also, saying, okay, from traditional banking, let me explore the startup side of
Yeah.
finance. um, so that was also an option, and it was definitely something I considered.
Hmm.
But the seed of it was, am I growing,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
So that's your anchor. That's your leverage.
Generally, that's my anchor, that am I
Hmm.
growing, right?
That's an interesting question to kind of sit and ponder. No, like, what does success even mean to me
Hmm.
at this point in time?
Yeah,
And to
and
have it documented somewhere, I
I think
think.
that's important.
I
We're given our current
think we
memory
trust
and
our,
attention
yeah,
spans.
we
Yeah,
trust our brains a little too
yeah,
much. But to
yeah.
really have it documented, maybe that's what the vision boarding and all of that is probably
Maybe,
about that
maybe.
eventually. But a very deep question, in fact.
Yeah. No, one of the things I like about the whole coaching journey is that you get to meet people from across industries,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Very varied. And recently, I've been interacting with a lot of senior people in technology, from a very hardware kind of space, right? And what has been interesting is that so many of them have been maybe 15, 20 years in that organization or in that domain, and still individual contributors.
Mm-hmm.
And they've chosen that. They've said, I want to go deep into the technology.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I don't want the maybe the baggage of managing people. Now you can say, okay, but oh, that's also a skill, etc. But it's not in their
There,
success
yeah, yeah,
metrics.
exactly. I mean, to them, the depth of knowledge is probably a lot more
Yeah,
significant of a driver
yeah.
than is, which is fine. I
Which is
mean,
fine. And for many, typically in larger organizations, whether it's FMCG, IT, banking, the larger your team, then the more successful you are. You have
yeah,
grown,
yeah,
because from managing one state, you're managing three states or three territories. That there is growth,
yeah,
and that also is fine, because that adds complexity, that adds nuances, that adds
yeah, yeah. It
understanding
shows that
different
you understand
businesses.
scale
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we should do like a journal sheet of sorts and put it up to go with
Huh.
this episode because,
Questions to ask, yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because that's actually the starting point to be able to sit down, and which is why coaching, like why many today are even approaching coaches
Yeah.
saying, I don't know what to ask myself, or I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to start that journey of
Asking.
asking,
Yeah.
right? And just be my accountability partner. That's
Mm-hmm.
really what the role that I would end up playing. But yeah, it's very important to and the accountability partner or somebody to also, like you said, call out that, hey, this is just you taking an easy route.
Mm.
It was good for a year, but will you be okay if you did this for the next 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the, I don't know,
Cost
short
benefit of,
term end game
yeah,
also,
yeah,
like what's,
yeah. And why?
yeah, yeah. Because I can, very kind of, I don't know, romantically say, oh, I'm, dropping my kid, I'm picking up my kid, I love that and all that. But that's because between those two events, there's a day
Whole
of
chunk
work.
of work that's happening. Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, we both know that it's not all pleasant days of, oh, bye,
Yeah, yeah,
there are a
that
lot of
too.
fights and a lot of things happening in that 5 minute span on a near weekly basis, if not
Correct,
more.
correct,
So I
correct.
think just again being present, and that's the
Yeah,
choice that you've made
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Mm.
But I think overall, the, you know, think about growth and be okay to pivot, and sometimes very consciously pivot.
Mm.
Like so many businesses today, the Indian Shark Tank businesses that you see, most of them are those kind of stories, right? They were
Mm.
doing something completely different,
Yeah,
and then some idea came, some thought process came, and then they pivoted. Even let's say a Falguni Nair and Naika,
yeah,
from such a
yeah.
successful banking career, and she stepped into, even if you've been successful in something doesn't mean that this is not going to feel scary and unknown, right?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's much worse, right?
Yeah,
Because
you're
you
watched
have a
even more.
perception now
Yeah,
to sort of maintain and
correct.
hold to. So
Yeah,
yeah,
there have been so many stories, inspiring stories of people who've really just kind of pivoted to something, and not all of them have succeeded also.
yeah. And also, I think what we are saying is it doesn't have to be that radical pivot every single
That's
time.
also
Like
there.
every 2 years, you don't
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
completely upend everything. It's not necessary.
yeah,
Do the right amount of
yeah.
pivoting, but do it often and also make sure that somebody external is sort of telling you when you're not.
Correct, correct. Both our parents were in, that stereotypical public sector
Yeah,
banking,
yeah.
where by, saying I will not take a transfer
Hmm.
was a way of saying I will sit in this chair for the next X number of years,
Yeah,
foregoing some promotion or foregoing some title,
yeah.
etc. Um, those were choices that people made, right? Which was
Hmm.
also perfectly fine.
Yeah,
They were not judged for it as, you know,
yeah. No, and definitely. I mean, the world has changed so much. I think 2 decades ago, when my parents stepped out of a corporate career to start up, I was like, what? I mean, what does
yeah,
it even
I can
mean? Like,
imagine.
what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? Where is the money going to come from? And I mean, it's a lot of very pertinent questions,
Yeah.
but just coming at the wrong time, I think. So definitely, there is a lot of precedent
Mm.
overall, and today that flexibility exists, thankfully. I guess it's just up to us to make a little more of it from time
Yeah.
to time.
And like you said, for a lot of folks who come for just looking at their resume and refreshing it, it it takes a quite a bit of effort to work with them, to make them see what are the skill sets that you've picked up
Yes,
in
yes.
each,
And
what are those transferable skills that you've picked up,
yeah,
because we're so knee deep in the work sometimes
you're
that
not looking at the rest of
yeah,
the
yeah,
world around you. And I
yeah,
think in a lot of places, it's not encouraged also to look at the rest
yeah,
of the world around you, unless you
maybe,
are fundamentally someone
correct.
who's very curious. It's better that you don't
Correct.
look
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the
yeah.
rest of the.
So you're like, oh, I see myself as a coder,
Yeah.
but there is so many other skill sets that you bring. Some are really good in crisis, some are really good in project managing, some are really good in building a team from scratch, and
Hmm.
those patterns you can see,
Yeah.
right? And typically, because you're good at it, you've said yes to those opportunities, and then you've got rewarded for it also. So maybe you've done more of it in different places,
Yeah.
right? So it's
It's a nice way to pick up on those cues and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
What you said yes to and what you said no to is a very powerful question to ask yourself.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think this episode warrants a sheet of questions. I think
You want to put up something,
I
don't
really
you?
do. Give me something.
Then get working on the merch.
Oh yeah, t-shirts incoming.
Yeah, so I think that's really our takeaway here. We started with growth, success, and a lot of it is about asking yourself some key questions,
Yeah,
spending some time with it, and if possible, and it should be possible, finding that one kind of
sounding board,
yeah,
accountability
yeah,
partner. And instinct is a powerful thing. It
oh
always tells you when,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
definitely tells you when something is wrong.
definitely, and then hence you should listen to it.
Yeah, or
All.
try at least. I think we'll start with trying. So this week on Read, Watch, Listen, as you can see, we are huge fans of words that keep repeating in threes. Let's talk about someone who's probably, I mean, I'll be kind and I'll say in the early days of pivoting through a lot of different things. We are talking, of course, about Hollywood celebrity turned royalty, turned I don't know what, honestly. But we have a new show coming out by none other than Meghan Markle, who believes in elevating everything that she does. Um, I'm going to give it a try, guys, and I hope you do too. And we'll talk then. But there's something exciting there. There is a story there that it's still evolving, and I think we shouldn't discount her too soon.
I've discounted her. I'm sorry. I'm moving on. So my recommendation this week is quite a surprising one, and it was an eye-opening conversation to listen in on. You know that I listen to Dax Shepard's podcast.
Yeah,
I think every week, right? Armchair Expert, and it's a
I think you've been one of their loyal followers
seriously
for
they
the
need to
longest
send
time.
me something, but it's a conversation typically worth listening to because it's the questions are thought provoking and there's good banter and all of that, and because of the year end break etc, they were replaying an old episode which I had missed, and this was an interview from 2019 with Monica Lewinsky,
Mm.
and I was amazed at how much judgment I held in my head, or just how the narrative is not moved forward at all, right? And
Hmm.
that happens with so many people. You came to know of them for one thing,
Yeah.
and that's it. Your time has stopped as far as you and they are concerned, and you've never really thought about what happened to them after that, or where life has taken them. But this young woman was such a revelation in terms of how she was so young,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And ultimately she bore the brunt of
The whole
what
scandal,
happened,
yeah.
um, trolled online, etc., etc. But she just took that as okay, this is an experience I've had. And after obviously some downtime trying to process all of that, emerged so much stronger as an advocate for anti-bullying stuff online, um, working with people on resilience, coming back from difficult situations. She's involved in many things, and I mean, I honestly don't remember the details of her work, but the maturity that
Hmm.
she showed in that conversation, the ability to kind of forgive and move on and make a life for
That's
herself. It was just,
truly something. I
you know,
mean,
because even they asked her, like, did you ever think of changing your name?
mm,
And she said, but nobody asked him to change his name,
mm,
right? And it was just so enlightening.
yeah,
And I think it's worth listening to,
yeah.
because we talk about resilience, and usually those are very, I don't know, sweet stories sometimes. We forget young
Yeah, but this is also
victims
resilience, right?
like this,
Yeah, yeah.
and the trajectory that their life probably took afterwards. So
Mm.
that's my listen for this week. So that's it, guys. We'll catch you next week. Thank you for listening to Small Talk, Work, Play, Build, and we'll be back with more. Meanwhile, you know what you have to do: hit like, subscribe, follow, comment, all of that. Bye.